All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SharePoint Power Hour. This is our live weekly show that we do streaming on YouTube on our SharePoint RAX channel. What is SharePoint Power Hour? Again, free, live, every Wednesday at 11 Central. Some kind of demos in SharePoint/SharePoint Online with Office 365. All the things that we talk about in Power Hour are not going to be programming and not going to be hardcore server admin topics. It's kind of everything else. And I'm Laura Rogers, and this is my team we're SharePoint consultants at Rackspace Hosting, and we all kind of take turns doing demos and teaching you some things every week. Before we get started, introducing everyone to kind of get familiar with the interface of what you're watching. This is streaming live in YouTube, and it comes from a Google Hangout. So when you're watching it on YouTube, you can actually click the little yellow link in the video to take you over to the Google Hangout. And the Google Hangout is where it will have a little Q&A panel. So once you're in the Google Hangout, it's going to have, by default, the little panel that's going to show the little app on the right side is called Showcase. But it's got some little squares, a little icon of squares at the top right in there that you can click and flip it over to the other app, which is the Q&A app, which is where you can ask us questions live. And that's kind of the whole point of us doing it live, is to get that interactivity and get that feedback from you guys and questions. So I'll go ahead, and the whole team is here. Awesome. Usually one or two people are off on site with a customer or busy, in other meetings, but this is awesome. Everybody's here. So we'll go, let's see, the order that you guys are on my screen is Joelle, Kevin, Ryan, Stephen, Tanya, and Tavis. So we'll just go that order and have everybody do a quick intro. Joelle, you're first.
Alrighty, hello everyone, I'm Joelle Farley. I am a business solution consultant. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just saw Laura say something and I couldn't hear her. So I am a business solution consultant at Rackspace. I've worked with SharePoint for about 7 or 8 years now, since SharePoint 2007 was released. And I am based out of Atlanta, Georgia.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hughes, SharePoint architect here on Laura's team at Rackspace. I'm based out of Kansas City, and my role on the team is to interact with our customers, gather whatever their requirements are for solving, whatever their issues are or what they want to achieve, and then to come up with the solutions required to deliver their solution in SharePoint, and work with the rest of our team to deliver that in some way.
Hi everybody, I'm Ryan Keller. I am based out of Colorado, and on the SharePoint team at Rackspace here, my role is the branding guy. So I make SharePoint look pretty. I've been working with SharePoint also for about 7 or 8 years, and I've been doing branding for around 4 of those years. So it's been a good time, and I guess I will just go ahead and turn it over to the next person.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Wilson. I am the admin nerd on the business solutions team, but I also do a lot of sort of beginning steps with SharePoint, first list, first libraries, first sites, site collections, all that kind of stuff. And then sort of, get you going on the bike, and then I take the training wheels off and turn you over to some of our other consultants who can help you out with the more specific topics. And I'm in the Cincinnati office.
Hi, I'm Tanya Keyser. I'm actually based in San Antonio at our headquarters, or as we refer to it, Castle. So I'm the admin for our internal SharePoint farm here at Rackspace. So my customers happen to be my coworkers, other Rackers. And I deal with a lot of the stuff that we talk about on Power Hour, the basic out-of-the-box components, and helping Rackers figure out how they're going to put that together for their SharePoint site.
My name is Tavis Lovell, and I'm the business intelligence developer on the business solutions team, and I'm based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. So I deal mainly with like reporting services, Performance Point, Excel services, Power Pivot, things like that.
Alrighty, and I'm Laura Rogers. I'm the manager of all these lovely people at Rackspace and a SharePoint MVP. So today's topic is I'm going to be the one doing the demo, and it comes from just something very basic. So when you think about SharePoint, we're empowering users and users to be able to quickly, create their own solutions, build what they need to build in SharePoint without having to get programmers involved for every little business process. So one of the things that comes up though is, when end users that don't necessarily know that much about SharePoint, when they're trying to get something done in SharePoint, what's just a basic thing they try to do is create just a simple request form. And so I actually have a specific example of one that came from one of our people trying to do this, one of our coworkers trying to do this on an internal farm. This is more of a end user / power user, some people that were trying to just create a basic request form. And so what I'm going to go through is some of the trials and tribulations and challenges of just SharePoint and InfoPath itself, and why this was way more painful than it should have been, and which is not this person's fault. It's SharePoint. Some things aren't as obvious necessarily, but and I'm going to show just a SharePoint list and basic ways that you can just turn things on, like content approval, and have just ways that you can make it so that people can only see things that pertain to them, have just some easy things happening in the form with just a basic request form without having to go into any kind of programming, without SharePoint Designer, without creating a workflow, but all these just easy things that you can just turn on that exist that people, if you're more advanced, you kind of sometimes forget about them, forget that they exist. And then for those power users, they're just super simple, just things that we can just use out of the box. All right, thanks, Ann. It's good to see you too. All right, so again, you guys feel free to pop stuff up in the Q&A as I'm going, and I'll go ahead and move this over here and share my screen. Let's see. Okay, so that's a SharePoint site. So the first thing I'm going to share with you is this pain point. So this is someone was trying to create a form in SharePoint, and it looks like they started from InfoPath. So they went to their computer, they clicked the start button, they opened InfoPath, and they clicked to create just a form library form. And they started, putting some fields in here of whatever's it's just a basic request form that they needed to create. So they built this form, they made it look nice and pretty with a pretty little red submit button, and then they wanted it. The goal was just for people to be able to fill out this form and have someone be notified of the forms that are being filled out whenever, get an email whenever the forms arrive. So what this person did was they said, oh, well, data connections, okay, I need one of those. I need to send this form in an email. I need someone to know when this form gets filled out. So that's what they did. They created a data connection to send an email to someone when someone clicks the submit button, which makes total sense. If you've never seen this and you're just trying to do something that you're just kind of clicking around and trying to figure out InfoPath, having something that submits something to an email makes total sense. But the problem is this isn't putting anything in SharePoint. It's not going to give you a list of anything. You're not ever going to be able to go back and refer to all the requests in one central place. It's basically just sending a single email whenever a form gets submitted, and it's not really doing anything in SharePoint. So technically you could have a button that they click to fill it out. And then also the pain around this is then you have to know the whole publishing process, how to publish this form to SharePoint, how the form library works, how to set up, how to create, where people are going to go to click a button and all this stuff to fill it out. So it ended up being, the question that this end user was asking me about was really just they had created this form and published it to a site, and they were trying to go back in and edit it, and they were trying to figure out how to get end users to fill it out. So which all shouldn't be so painful. So the first thing, my suggestion was to just not make this a form library form, not do this, send an email, data connection, or just basically scrap what had been created, because it's only a handful of fields. It's not a ton of work that necessarily had been done. So the suggestion is to create a SharePoint list out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk through creating this basic SharePoint list and just any kind of request that you have in your company. It doesn't have to be, whatever this specific thing is that I'm showing you. It can be like, think about some different requests that might exist in your company, like a travel request, an expense request, a check request. I mean, you got a bajillion different. This one's some very, very specific request around some supply chain report that someone needs. All right, so I'm just going to create a list and just, be creative and think about just any kind of just requests that are floating around in your company. I'm going to go ahead and create this just as a custom list, and I'll call it supply chain request. So hopefully, and you guys can use the little Q&A panel to give me feedback of just common forms that you see that you need to create in your company, just so we can kind of see that little just interaction from you guys as I'm doing this. So I called it a supply chain request, and now I see it. I'm in Office 365, but this works the exact same way in SharePoint. Pretty much whatever version of SharePoint, 2010 and up are going to do pretty much all the things that I'm showing you in this demo. So I can go straight to the settings page like this here, and now I have my columns. And by default, it just gives me a title column, and it gives me some basic things. So what some of the fields are we need here is one of them that they have is the background or purpose of request. And what I can do is I can just take this title field and just rename it. So I can say request purpose. Like that, and I can say, what is the purpose of your request? I can just have a lot of information for them. And then I do want to make it required. And I'll go ahead and just add a couple more fields here. I'm not going to spend too much time adding a bunch of fields, because again, these are going to be different depending on what your form is. Desired outcome, and I'll go ahead and make this multiple lines of text. And I don't want to do enhanced rich text. I just want to do plain text, because enhanced rich text is just if you have people that need to put bold and colors and things like that in their text box, and I really don't need that. Another thing that I do with these bigger text box like this is I don't add it to the default view of my list, so that you don't end up with this weird column that's like got all this data in it that gets really big. And then let's see, create another column, need by date. And I'll make that a date field, and then I'll just say, sure, that's required too. And data source is one that they have in here. This is because they're requesting some sort of report. So I'm just going to type the choices in here. Oops, what's it doing? There we go. And I'll say fields. I'll just put 3 things in here. And they have theirs as a drop-down box, so we can just leave it as a drop-down. And I don't want to put a default value in here. I want the person filling it out to have to choose something. Click OK, and then format of output was one of the things that they had in their request. I'll just use that. And I'll just put a couple of things in here, not necessarily all of them. That's another choice. And what kind of file would you like? Okay, and then this is going to be, make it radio buttons, but I'll go ahead and say chart, Excel, PowerPoint. Right, and they wanted to do, let's see, for the data source, I'll go ahead and click on this one. One of the things that they wanted to have in their data source drop-down box, I just remembered, was they wanted to have an other. So look, all you have to do for that other option is just say allow fill-in choices and change it to yes, and that way they can type something else. You don't have to type other as an option in there. All right, so let's go see. Okay, another thing that's one of just the basic things that I always do every time I create a list is the concept of attachments. Attachments, in my experience, having an attachment to a list ends up adding way more confusion for the end users than it does anything else, and most lists aren't going to actually need an attachment. Usually you might need an attachment to a list item, say if you've got maybe help desk request and you want people to be able to attach kind of like a screenshot of an error they're getting or something like that. But in most cases when you have a file that needs to be involved, usually you would have a document library for that. So what I usually do is I just go into advanced settings as soon as I create the list and disable attachments and click OK. All right, yeah, sure, okay. All right, now let's just go see what this form looks like so far. So I've got my list, it's got some of my options here, and I can go click New Item and just fill out some stuff. Blah, blah, I'm not very creative. Need by date. Data source, again, see I can type my own thing here and then click Save. So that's what it looks like out of the box, just a basic form. Here are a couple of things now that we can do to make it look, make it kind of have some of these functionalities that people need to have with, you know, either a basic level of approval or being able to get emails. Because remember, one of the main things they wanted to do was get emails when things get submitted. Guess what? All I have to do is set up an alert. So when I go to this list tab, I can just set up an alert on this list, and then I don't have to. If I have a more advanced level of permissions on this site, like on this one I have full control, I don't have to put myself here. I can put something else. I can put a SharePoint group here. I can put an Active Directory group here. So it's kind of up to me what users I put. I am just going to go ahead and put me in there just for fun. But again, I don't have to just use me. I can, if I'm more of an admin on the site, then I can put other people in here to be able to create an alert for them. One little tidbit about that is that if you if you put individual people's names in here, or if you use a SharePoint group, everyone's going to get, of course, an email saying that they have now have alert that's been set up for them. But all those individuals now have the ability to go click modify the alert and to go tweak their own alert, or if they're getting too many, they can go change how often they get them and things like that. If, instead of doing that, if you use an Active Directory, email-enabled Active Directory group here, it will send alerts to the whole group, and people will not be able to go in and individually modify whether or not they receive that alert. So just kind of a heads up on how that works. Now, I only want to be notified about new items. I don't necessarily want to be notified about every single thing that happens in here. And maybe I only want to be notified about somebody else adding. Like if I add something in there, I don't want to be alerted, so I can do that. So, and then I want to get this immediately. Or if I get a whole bunch of them, I can just say I want a daily summary. All right, so that's so easy. You don't have to do a workflow to get notified when things arrive. You don't have to do any kind of fancy data connection in InfoPath. It's just for good old alerts. All right, another thing that exists in here that's out of the box that people need a lot on request forms, and you guys, my coworkers in the chat window, I know that you guys see this a lot, especially Tanya, you've worked with this specific one because it's an internal request that came in. So y'all just jump in and interrupt me because I'm just going to keep talking. But first of all, there's a question in the little Q&A by Xantios. Says, will this method allow validation of form fields such as data type or input masks? There are a couple of things that we can do with an out-of-the-box list for validation, and there's even more that we can do once we customize this form in InfoPath. So I'll show you both of those options in a minute. All right. So first thing that I'm going to do is just that basic approval. Just basic level of approval that they want to have in here. This particular situation, they didn't ask about having an approval process, but again, this is just one of those common things where just one level of approval, it's just something you can turn on. It's in the versioning settings for your list or library. I'm not sure why it's there, but that's where they put it. It's called content approval. So see, I can just say require content approval for submitted items, and that way, everything, so for the people that have contribute or read access to this list, they are not going to see items in this list until they have been approved. So I can just turn that on. Also, I like to always just use version history just in general, just because always put a number here. Don't just leave it open-ended. That could end up going bonkers. But I usually like to put a number here and just turn versioning on. All right, when you turn on the content approval, you'll notice down here draft item security. Who should see draft items in the list? Only users who can approve items and the author of the item. I don't want everybody who can read items to see content approval. That kind of negates the whole purpose of content approval to me. So I turn that on and I click OK. And now I broke it. That's awesome. Maybe I was on that form too long. Let's see. Turn that off and see if it works. Maybe I changed too many settings at once and SharePoint got confused. All right, I required content approval, chose yes. I'll try and turn this on again. I don't know why it would not work. It's Office 365, so I have no control over that. Okay, so now once I turn on content approval, look at this. I've got new views in here. It just automatically builds for me. So now so whoever's submitting requests to this list can go to this My Submissions view, and they can see things that they've submitted, and they're even in little groupings according to what their approval status is and whether the approver makes any comments. So one type of alert you can also create on a list is, and you can create multiple alerts on the same list as well. You can just give them different, so I just clicked modify my alerts. But you can create multiple alerts on one list, and you can just give them different names. So I'm actually going to create a new alert and show you what the people that are submitting things could do in here. They could just say existing items are modified, someone else changes an item created by me. So this could be just someone has submitted something to a list, and it gets approved or rejected, and they want to know when that happens. So you could basically put all the users that are going to be potentially submitting items to this list and put them in here, and then say my request modified or something. That way, you can have certain different names for your different alerts that you create. All right, so that's what the requester experience can be, just for knowing when you submitted something and knowing when something happens to it. All right, so for the person who's approving things, how do you know who the approvers are? It's a permission called approval. So let's go dig in and see what that permission is and how you can give it to people. I'm going to go to my, Joni says, SharePoint groups work for assigning alerts. I was trying to use that function and the picker wouldn't pull up any of my SharePoint groups. I've never seen that happen, Joni. It's always worked for SharePoint groups for me. If it's an Active Directory group, I've seen it not let you pick the Active Directory group if it was not an email-enabled Active Directory group. But I've never seen it not work for SharePoint groups. Has anybody else in here seen that happen? No? Shout it out.
As long as an email address is assigned to the Active Directory group, it should be all right. And you can even, for this purpose, use Active Directory distribution groups where you wouldn't be able to assign permissions to them. You still can use them for alerts. The trick is if they show up in the people picker when you go to validate that entry, when you type in the name and you go to check that to make sure it's a valid group. If it shows up there and has an email address assigned, it should work.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. All right, so how do you determine who the approvers are? I'm going to my site settings, and I'm at the root level of my site collection, and I'm going to site permissions, and I'm going to look at the permission levels that exist. So there are a bunch of out-of-the-box permission levels. I don't recommend ever modifying the out-of-the-box ones. It looks like now in Office 365, this is new, they actually are grayed out so you can't accidentally mess with them, because maybe people were doing that and Microsoft made them all. That's interesting, huh? Any of you ever noticed that before? So it used to be just full control that was grayed out that you couldn't modify. So that's good that they did that. But see, there's an out-of-the-box level called approve. So what you could do is you could use that level to just, give that. Let's see, is she a site collection admin? Says Anne. I am a site collection admin. Yes, if that's what you're asking. But there's an out-of-the-box level called approve. I could, if I wanted to create my own custom level, I could do that. I could actually take an existing one and not modify it, but copy it. And I can say, I could call it Laura, or form approve. Just something custom, just so you can see that it's different. Can edit items and approve. All right, and then see right here, it's just a checkbox that exists. So all I've done is taken the contribute permission level for just the normal things that people can do when they can contribute to a list, and I add approve, and then I can actually I just create that, and then on that specific list, I'll go down to that list and go down to my permissions for that list, advanced, right, and stop inheriting permissions. So I created a custom permission level. I could create a SharePoint group if I want to. Well, it looks like there's already one called approvers. But I can take any SharePoint group, maybe I want to call it project managers or whatever I want to call it. And when I first create a SharePoint group, I don't have to give it access to the site when I first create it. I can just only use that SharePoint group on a specific list if I want to. So I'm going to take just approvers, and I'm going to say, for this list, I want approvers to have this custom form approve level that I created. So I totally can control what they're doing. So I can take everybody else, not owner. I'm going to leave owners alone, and I'm going to leave remove everybody like that. And then maybe I can say, so I've got approvers who can approve it. I've got maybe domain users. I want everybody else to be able to just fill this out. I'll just put everyone. Forget this is not on premises. Everyone. And then don't send an email. And I want everyone just to be able to contribute. That gives them add, edit, delete in that list. Okay, so whoever's in the approvers list, those are the ones that are going to have that content approval where they can approve and reject things in the list. So let's go back and see what that experience is going to look like for the approvers. So they can actually, of course, set up an alert so they'll be notified when things arrive in the list. And then, oh, Anne was asking, she was talking to Joni to ask if she was a site collection admin. All right. It would help if we had a chat window in here, huh? They can go to, when they get an alert, they can go look at the approve reject items view here. Now notice this item that I had put in the list, I put it in there before I turned on the content approval setting, so it already shows as approved. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new item, and I'm not going to go through all this complexity of logging on as different users and stuff, but I'm just going to say, I'm just going to be me. Items on this list require content approval. Your submission will not appear in public views until approved by someone with proper rights, and then it takes you to more information. So another request, stuff, and then we'll talk about the validation stuff in a minute, and save. All right, so the person who's the approver will get an email when that thing arrives in the list, and now they're on approve reject items, and it shows as pending. So what does the approver do? There are a couple of ways they can get to it. They can go to the ribbon here to that item, and they can click approve reject, or on the approve reject items view, they have a little little drop down, the little ellipsis. And look, Microsoft's just, this is brand new too, this little advanced thing. You never know what you're going to get in Office 365. Huh? All right, so there's approve, reject, and then that's where I can say approved, looks good.
That's new since last week.
Awesome. Okay, so then this is where my comments go, over in this approver comments view. And then the person looking at their own submissions is also going to see the approver comments there. All right, and they're going to get, if they set up an alert, they're going to get an email letting them know what the approver had done. Okay, so let's see. The next kind of out-of-the-box setting that I want to show you is, so for content approval, once something is approved, it shows for everybody who can see that list, can see all the items in there that are approved. There's something different that you might want to do in your list, though, which is a very common requirement, and it is to make it so that people can all contribute to a list, or they can fill out a form, but they can't see all the stuff that other forms that people have filled out. Is this a huge requirement for just about every form that we do, right? Everybody in the chat window is like, you're all raising your hands. I'm raising my hand, nobody can see me. So, huge, very common requirement. It's just one of those things that people forget, that this is not something that you can do in a library, a form library, a document library, but this is something that you can do in lists, and it's so easy. Just say, I only want people to be able to see items that they created, and I can even say I want people to be able to edit items that they created, or if I say none, then that means they can't even edit the items that they create. They can only see them. So that way I can turn that on, and then this is going to be the people who have the manage lists. It's another one of those permissions that's in there that you can give people. By default, the edit permission level has manage lists. So y'all be careful about the edit permission level, because if everybody has that, then that kind of negates the whole point of this. But if they have just the regular old, good old-fashioned contribute permission level, and then they're only going to, this is going to apply to them. All right, so I'll go ahead. I can just do that here.
And one thing that I see, I'm not sure if it's available in Office 365, quite a bit of a need for is to create a custom permission level for contribute, no delete. So you want the exact same permissions as contribute, but you don't allow users to delete list items or versions. So if they want to come in and delete one of their own items, they would not be able to do that. And sometimes that's really needed to be able to track certain items.
Great idea. Let's go do that real quick, Tanya. So I'll go back to where I was a minute ago in my permissions, site permissions, and this is at the root level of my site collection. I go to permission levels, and then I'm going to take contribute and make another copy of it. And I'm going to call it, oh, come on, contribute, no delete. Can add and edit, not delete. Usually when I create this permission level, I'm just going to put it on a specific list in library. I'm not usually going to apply this to an entire site. That's kind of overkill. So all I have to do is just uncheck the ability to delete items, and I usually just go ahead and uncheck the ability to delete versions as well. And click Create. And then I'm going to go down to that specific list that I have here and go to my list, my permissions in there. I'm going kind of fast, but I know you guys can pause it or rewind it or stuff if you're watching it later. And instead of giving all users the ability to contribute, I'm going to edit that one and give them the ability to contribute, no delete. All right, so but then that setting that I just gave them still applies to where they'll only be able to see their own items. So when it comes to being able to do something around items that you created versus items that other people created, that's where that setting is going to be really useful for this little item level permission setting. So again, that makes it so the people who have the manage list permission will be able to see everything. They can take, slice and dice it and sort and filter by the columns, export it to a spreadsheet, whatever they want to do. But then all those people that are contributing to the list, filling out forms, maybe you've got top secret information you don't want them to be able to have to share with everybody, they will only be able to see their own stuff. So I think that's a really great, just underused setting that exists out of the box. Another thing that we'd like to be able to do is to put a pretty button on the home page. So, by default, the way this site is, people would be going to the site, they would be going to the list, and then they'd be clicking the new item button to fill out a new form. Well, what if I want it to just, want it to put it in a pretty little promoted links button on the home page and just give them a quick link to just immediately fill out the form and not have to go all these different places. This is another one of the things that the people were trying to do in this example site that I had, this example form. So let's see, I don't think I created a promoted links list yet. I'll go ahead and create one of those. Add an app, just call it promoted links. All right, so now I have a list, and I need to have a link though before I start. Now we did a whole power hour, 2 other power hours on the concept of the promoted links list that Kevin did, so those are out there if you guys want to look those up. Oh, and wanted to shout out to say that they have an add and edit and an edit only in their site collections. Oh, that's a good idea. Great. Good to know. All right, so for a promoted link, I need to have a URL to where the link needs to take you. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and go to my supply chain request, click new item, and now this page that I'm on is going to give me the URL that I'm going to need for people to be able to fill out a new item. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm just going to put it in a notepad over here. And what I really need, I don't need all the stuff after the source. The source is going to be where they get redirected after they fill it out. I'm not going to worry about that right now because I want it to be just in a pop-up box anyway. So I need this new form.aspx. So now I have my link, and now I can go to promoted links and go create a new promoted link, fill out a request. And I'm not going to bother with a background image right now, but I'm going to paste my URL there. And then I want to say, I want to put it in the dialog box too. So I'll just show you what it looks like the way they kind of had theirs in the in-page navigation. And I'll show you what the dialog box concept is. So the way it is now is people would go here, I'll put it on the home page first. And people would go there and it would just navigate them to the form in its own entire page. But we want it to look kind of cool and professional. We want it to pop up in front of where they are so they don't have to actually navigate to the list. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just sticking my promoted links on the home page like that. All right. And then, oh, Ann says we also give our design group view permissions. View permissions. Oh, okay, good to know. So now when they click fill out a request, it takes them, but it's still kind of ugly. Not only is it an ugly out of the box form, but it takes them to this whole kind of form just on the web page. So one thing I can do is I can, in my list settings, another thing in the advanced settings that's really useful is this modal pop-up, the launch forms in a dialog. And back in SharePoint 2010, that was always yes by default. In 2013, Office 365, it's no by default, but you can change it to yes. And then when you do that, people click new item, it pops up in front, so it looks kind of nicer. And then I'll go ahead and not only do that, but go ahead and go to my promoted link. Now, I don't know what the difference is between doing it in here and if you have to do it in both places, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to see when I clicked on promoted link, it didn't pop it up, even though I enabled in the list. So I have to go to my promoted link actual setting that says to pop it up in a modal box. So I'll go to my all promoted links and edit that one and say instead of in-page navigation, a dialog box. So now when people go click the button, see it pops up, so I can just be on the home page or wherever, fill out the form, and then the form just goes away and I'm done. So that's pretty useful. I'll go ahead and show you guys the next out-of-the-box setting that I wanted to show you, and it's around one of the things that someone was asking in the Q&A about dates. So they have this need by date. There is something you can do out of the box with validation without getting InfoPath involved. So I can go to my validation settings, and I can say, let's see, the need by date needs to be, so specify the formula you want to use and validate when new items are saved to the list. To pass validation, the formula must evaluate to true. So the need by date needs to be greater than the created date. Does that sound about right? Need by date should be in the future. I can test that out. Test 3. And then I'll put it, so I'll try putting it in the past and then see what happens. See, need by date should be in the future. So that's the out of the box validation. See, now it says pending because it needs to be approved because of my content approval that's turned on. All right, so that's the out of the box validation. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my out of the box validation setting. And there's not, I mean, it's kind of limited because that's the only little place, that's the only little surface you have to be able to do that. You do have the ability to go down into individual columns. The problem with doing that in here is if you wanted to be able to compare two fields to each other, you wouldn't be able to do that in the individual columns. But you could do a rule that's like, you know, company name has to equal my company, or just something more specific like that. Anything about validation rules that you guys know that I don't know that I failed to mention there? There isn't much to them, I don't think. All right.
Well, the one thing about those, some of the validation requests I've had before have been make sure that whatever's entered here matches a value in another list, and that's pretty complex to do with in any case, but it's not something that's easily done or even done with those out-of-the-box tools.
Yes, great. Very true. They're very limited. Let's see. Devil the Hell, that's your name? Devil the Hell says, for validation settings, is there any formula for checking if a field is all capitals or phone numbers 9 digits? No, that's where we have to go to InfoPath, and that's the next thing we're going to do. So what this particular request that we got, where they had started off like with a form library form that looked like this, they're still able to create this as a list and do all these great things with all these out-of-the-box list settings, and then be able to still customize it with InfoPath. In InfoPath, if you're watching and you don't know this, Microsoft has said that its end of life is in the year 2023. So I clicked Customize in InfoPath, and as long as I have the InfoPath Designer software on my computer, this is where it would pull up. I don't recommend changing the size of this box or anything like that, but I do recommend kind of doing a couple things to make it nicer looking. Supply chain request. You can put a title in there, give it a nice little format there. I can go into my little out-of-the-box colors and stuff, and I can just quickly apply a color theme. It's a lot easier to pick one of these than it is to go into all the individual cells and stuff and start messing with those. And then, so now the thing that they wanted that was not apparent when they created just a SharePoint list form for people to fill out was that they needed people to be able to submit the form. But when you create it in this list and people fill out a new item, they're just clicking a save button. They're filling it out and they're clicking save. Well, in this particular case, they wanted it to not have to be a save button. They wanted it to be a button that says submit. So that's a quick, easy thing that we can do is we can just throw a button onto the bottom of our form like this, and then just center it like that. And in the ribbon, we have the ability to say, make that a submit button. Make the action be that it submits it. All right, and then there's even, let's see, we can say under this little Submit Options button, we can say show this message if the form submission fails. You can say show this message if the form is submitted successfully. So you can actually make it say the form was submitted successfully and then close the form, and which will show them like a little pop-up after they fill it out instead of the form just disappearing. So that's kind of nice. So I'll go ahead and all I have to do is just close this and hit Save and Publish. We had a whole other SharePoint Power Hour that I did on just customizing list forms with InfoPath like this. So that's a whole other one that you can go watch. I don't know if any of you have time, you can go find that and put the link in the little app there, in the little, what's it called, Showcase app that's in the Google Hangout. Anyway, so now what's it going to look like? I click New Item. And look at that. So now it still has this nice little warning that I need to know about things requiring content approval, but I can fill it out and click Submit. So let's go to what that user experience is going to be. So we'll go to the home page and click Fill Out a Request. Request for. And you can see that all the little descriptions that I had typed in my field descriptions are showing on the form. When you're doing these, I recommend creating all your fields and putting all the settings and stuff on the fields first, and then converting it, customizing it with InfoPath last. Need by date, and then I'll show you how to do this more validation in InfoPath as well, which is a little more fancy. I'll fill out a couple of those and click Submit. And then see, I get the nice little, the form was submitted successfully because of that setting that I had in InfoPath. All right, so now we'll show you a couple of validation things that you guys were asking about real quick, or at least show you how to, where that is. So I click Customize the form in InfoPath again, and it's thinking about it. Another thing I want to show you guys that I'm going to try to remember. Can you believe I stretched this out to almost an hour already? For sure you guys aren't surprised, considering I just kind of made this up this morning as to what I was going to do for Power Hour. All right, validation. So need by date in InfoPath. I wrote a whole InfoPath book if you want to be able to read about all this stuff in detail. It's a step-by-step. It's a 2010 book, but they didn't change anything in InfoPath from 2010 to 2013. So I click on the field, I go to this rules pane over here, and I create what's called a validation rule. So that way I can say, I can call it whatever I want to call it, like certain dates. I don't know. And then I can say, according to what condition do I want to show an error? So date must be in the future. And then the conditions are a lot more, and there's a lot more you can do in here than you can in those, in that out-of-the-box one that I was showing you. So need by date is already required. So need by date is not blank. It has something in it, and the need by date is, let's see, is less than, I'll say if the need by date is less than today plus 7. So it needs to be like at least a week out, maybe. How does that sound? Need by date is less than today plus 7, then show an error. Must be at least a week. I don't know if it's going to show all that. Future. And then I can do a little preview and test that out. A little preview pane in InfoPath. So let's see, I'll do like something like that. And then it immediately shows it in red because it's not following my rule. And then, oops, see, I did my rule wrong. I'll just do need by date is less than today. I'll just do today. Just to see if I can figure out what I'm doing wrong here. I don't want to spend too much time on a validation rule, really. Need by date is less than today. Show an error. Well, okay, real quick, you wanted to talk about, somebody was asking about phone numbers and stuff too. So that, like, pretend this is a phone number field. What I can do is they actually have these little rules that I can say doesn't match a certain pattern. I usually like to just start with this one that exists already that says is not an email address, just because it's got some of this stuff in it out of the box. And then I just go and change it. Instead of saying doesn't match pattern email, I just go pick a different pattern or make up my own pattern of like phone number, or see, I can make my own pattern down here. So that's like regex expression stuff. Enter a valid phone. So that was just a real quick way to show you that you can do a validation rule that lets you do that kind of thing. Undo that, so get rid of that. Can you create a field that is protected, such as a password field, which only shows asterisks? I don't think so. Maybe as you're typing, it only shows asterisks. I don't
think you can do like a password field or anything like that in there by default.
Yeah, you're right, because then you would still be submitting it to a SharePoint list, and then it would still look like it would, even if you could do it in InfoPath. Even if you could do it in InfoPath, it would just show when they submit it, it would show as actual a word in the list. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this rule that I created too, and I'm not going to delve too far into that. But yeah, so that's how you can do some of those things in your form. I'm just going to go ahead and save and publish it. And then you guys feel free to keep asking questions. I have another thing I want to show you guys about alerts. So one of the things that I mentioned in the description of this session was that different people can be notified about different things arriving in the list that maybe pertain to something like their own department or something. So for example, I have these data sources. So maybe I have particular people who are in charge of the payables, and they care about those forms that are being submitted, versus other people who might care about purchasing, and they don't want to create an alert where they get notified about every single thing in the list. They just want to be more specific to whatever their particular thing is. So I'm going to go create a new view, and I'm just going to base it off of my all items view, and I'm going to call it payables. I have to create filtered views for this to work. So I'll say, what was that field called? Data source is equal to payables. Data source is equal to payables, and click OK.
You may need to capitalize payables in your filter.
It's not case sensitive, so it looks like it worked. So there's my payables. And then what were some of the other ones? Let's see. There was payables, there was inventory, and purchasing. So I can go to payables. I can just go, create a new view, and then just use payables as my template, and then just call this one inventory. And then just change this. That way I'm just copying a current view, and I just change that one thing. And then I'll do one more called purchasing, and just copy that one. So the trick to what I'm about to show you with these filtered alerts is the fact that these have to be filtered views. So this is a purchasing filtered view. So yours could be department is equal to IT or accounting or whatever your field is, or that certain category that people need to be able to, quickly just only get alerts about those things. Then when I've had my filtered views that exist, then when I go create an alert, oops, ooh, you cannot create, okay, that's because of that other setting that I created. You cannot create alerts for lists for which users can only read their own items. So that's one of the caveats, if y'all might have come across this before. See, it's this setting that I turned on. So I can't create an alert if I've turned on that setting, basically. So I'll just take that setting off just to be able to show you this thing with the alerts. And in the real world, what you could do is you could turn on the setting, and then you'd have to use a workflow instead of alerts. So it's kind of one of those like kind of give and take where, pros and cons, you get this, but you have to take away that. All right, so now I'll go create my alert. And now I can see this new option in here, see? I only want to be alerted when something changes in a specific filtered view. So I am in the payables department. I only care about payables. Maybe you even have a SharePoint group of people, and it's called payables. You could put that SharePoint group name here, payables, and they only get alerts for payables, and then click OK. And now I have a custom filtered alert. I wrote a blog. This is actually one of the very first blog posts that I ever wrote back in SharePoint 2007 on how to do this. If I go to all my posts, like way back, this is, oh no, I gotta go further, goodness. And this was after I migrated it from my WordPress. So John actually migrated all these items for me, so they were in WordPress before. Anyway, it's called Alerts Based on Views. And I had sent this out where I used to work as like Laura's tip of the week, SharePoint tip of the week or whatever, and it was how to create alerts based on filtered views. So that's been around for a while. We only got 5 minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions, or any of you guys? Tanya, you had some things that you were going to kind of throw in there around requests like this?
So one other column field that's built in that might be useful for people is the Assign To field. Similar to creating alerts, you can use the built-in column Assign To, and then in the advanced features, select email notification when people are assigned an item. So they don't have to go in and create an alert when their name is entered in that Assign To field. They'll receive an email notification. And using our advanced settings, you can go in and change the name of that column from Assign To something else. Notify a status change, or responsible party, whatever it needs to be for your use case.
Yeah, and so you guys, if you create a task list, you're going to have, that's just one of your advanced settings, is just to say, let people get an email when their name is in the Assign To box. So that's a great idea. So even if you create it as a task list, you can still have that setting and just change all the names of the fields to whatever your particular purpose is. Yeah, that's cool. Let's see. I've got a very long question. Let's see. Marianne says, if you were to have a list or library with perhaps 30,000 items, is there a way to search through the list or library via metadata without predefined views? Since Office 365 is restricted to 5,000 by Microsoft, and on-site is 5,000 recommended but changeable. Not really, because once you have a view that shows you everything, and you have more than 5,000 items, and it's not a filtered view, it's going to show you that little arrow across the top. There is this thing called metadata navigation that you can turn on in your list or library, which gives you the ability to have your metadata down the left side. And it's actually a site feature that you have to enable to be able to get this as a setting in your list or library. But once you have that, you can use that, but unfortunately you still have to have, the views have to be filtered views around that item limit though, because you'll still get an error if your default view is all items. Does anybody else have any? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd recommend setting up a content search web part for that.
Great idea.
And then if you can actually then use the power of search to return a view of that library by restricting the query to only show results from that library or list. And if you want, you can add a search box that points results to that, so it acts as a filter even for that.
Ooh, nice. Oh, are you going to do that in the next Power Hour, Kevin?
I may be able to set something up like that for the future.
That's a great idea. So, of course, you get this little find an item box, but when you have a list that has more than, whatever that threshold is, you still are going to get a little error saying, your item might be in this list, but click this extra button to let it search through the rest of the list, and then if it's filtered, it's not going to show there anyway, and it's still kind of awkward. So yeah, that would be great to be able to have, just use the power of the content search web part, or like a custom search center, to be able to have an interface all around being able to drill down into that list without being in the list and just using search. Very cool. All right. Let's see, I'll go ahead and, any other last questions? We got 1 minute left. Let's see, next week we have, I don't know, we'll figure something out. Usually figure these out kind of at the last minute, but shout it out if you want to let one of us know on Twitter, or you can make a comment on YouTube if you have an idea about Power Hour. We get people submitting ideas every now and then on the YouTube channel for Power Hour, but a lot of the times they're like a very, very, very specific business requirement, and it's basically building out that solution. So that's a little too involved. But if it's a little bit more of a generic concept, then that helps a little bit to be able to just kind of figure it out as we go type of thing. One more question, Access 2010 linked list database. Any comments on if this is a viable solution? Yeah, I mean, if everybody has access on their computers and they are using a SharePoint list as their back end, like their table, then it gives them a nice, very custom front end to be able to interface with that SharePoint data from just within the Access software. But and it lets you have your back-end data all in that one place in SharePoint, and it's being backed up and everything. So I don't have a problem with it. Usually most companies just don't have, all their end users don't own Access. But yeah, makes sense to me. It's not that bad. All right, I'll let you guys go. It's 12:01 my time, so I can see everybody's dropping off. But we'll see you guys next week, same time, same place. Over and out.
Bye.